You might be able to grow that business wildly, but just know that your life will be more complicated. And you have to make sure that everybody else who you are currently responsible for and want to keep along the journey are willing to sign up for that complication as well.
Welcome to VezaTalks podcast. Today, it's my honor to welcome Jason Todd, who is an award-winning business strategist, a veteran on-demand CTO, CIO, and an advisory board member. Jason has founded, grown, and exited 4 businesses. He has written over 1 million lines of software code. He managed negotiations with billion-dollar companies, and he developed brand identities for businesses up to $300 million. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome, wonderful. So I know that you're heavily involved in leadership and different companies and whatnot. But before we talk about all those things, tell me a little bit about your journey, when you were younger, and how did you get to get into business? Was it something that you broke and you said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, work for other people, or what was that thing that kind of got you involved in that journey?
I think I've always been a misfit. That's the word that comes to mind, and not a misfit in a bad way, but a misfit in the sense that I was doing my own things when everybody else was out playing baseball in the park next door. I was at home programming, and it's not that I didn't enjoy things like baseball, but I would spend hours by myself walking to the local creek, playing with the fish and the crayfish, and then taking them back to my house and experimenting. And I coupled that, no fault of my own, but I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and so I think my natural inclination to do my own thing, plus from a business standpoint, a family culture of entrepreneurship, it launched me into this idea that if I'm going to do something professionally, I can just do whatever I want. And so as a young guy, I started off in sales and marketing, and then quickly moved into following my passions in technology. Okay. And then that launched into all sorts of technology related things. And after starting one company, you might as well start a second one. And it's just parlayed. It's parlayed from there.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, I know we're probably similar in age. When I first learned BASIC back in the day, and then Fortran. I don't know if you remember that language.
Oh yeah.
Sounds like we had some similar paths and all that. But so tell me about your first exit with your company. What was that like? Normally, these type of things, especially the first one, is really stressful. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of what type of company it was? Probably tech, and a little bit about that story.
Sure. Well, my first real company, I would say, was an e-commerce company. We were the first, or maybe the second company on the scene back in 2002 to offer residential and light commercial heating and air conditioning products directly to consumers. Now, it's a pretty closed supply chain. Usually it's a manufacturer selling to a distributor, selling to a dealer who's insisting on installing that air conditioner or that furnace into your house. We came as, again, misfits or outsiders to the industry and said, you know what if you could purchase these products yourself as a consumer? You could save hundreds or thousands of dollars and do all or part of the installation yourself. So when I finally sold that 8 or 9 years later, I had a network of about 30,000 contractors who would help you with all or part of the installation. And we were distributing from about 7 distribution centers nationally, and then did a little bit of work internationally as well. So, and it was stressful. I had a business partner at the time, and we were, butting heads on various things. And I didn't know, as a young guy, I didn't know how to have conversations that maybe I would have now. And so I thought, I got to go. And there are twists and turns in that story, and it all worked out fine. But I ended up selling that company and retiring for a little bit.
Awesome. And so, I remember back in the day when e-commerce was, in the early 2000s, when people were afraid to put credit cards online, and, many conversations I had back in the day is like, who's going to buy anything online, and then it just kind of, filtered through. How do you think e-commerce, and I've been in e-commerce for 20 years now, how do you think e-commerce has changed from back then to now in terms of, let's call it marketing, apart from social media now and everything. Like, what do you think? Because I had a conversation yesterday with a young guy. He's from Cuba, and he was like, "Oh, I want to sell baby products to Utah." And I'm like, "Okay, why Utah?" Well, that's GPT just told me that that's where most of the babies are, and I was like, "Okay, great." So it was funny because I didn't know even where to start, because there's so many elements to e-commerce, that it's not like you can just tell somebody what to do in a couple of sentences, right? But what would you say to somebody that wants to start an e-commerce business today? What would your advice be?
Well, your question there was, how has e-commerce changed? And you said you've been in e-commerce for 20 something years, and I have been too. And I liken it to this. Imagine the first restaurant that showed up in your city. Imagine it. Everybody was eating at home, and all of a sudden the restaurant shows up, and everybody's like, you know what? We got to go to that restaurant. And then somebody else says, you know what we should do? We should open a restaurant. And all of a sudden you got two restaurants. And now all of a sudden there's, should we go to this restaurant or this restaurant, or we could eat at home? And all of a sudden now their restaurants are ubiquitous. Choosing a restaurant is a complicated task now. There are so many options. There are so many places that will serve you Mexican food or Chinese food or American food. Where do you go? And in my town, a restaurant that has been a staple in the area has now closed officially for after 30 years. E-commerce is very similar in the maturation of that market. When we started selling heating and air conditioning products online, we were the guys. It was us. We did it well. We were not just a dealer who decided to go online. We treated this as a consumer-oriented business, a retailer, a wholesaler. We were amazing. We were the people you're going to come to. And then over the course of maybe 5, 6, 7 years, more people got in the game. And so our marketing was not just, by the way, we're here. Oh, great. You need a heating and air conditioning products. We're the people. It's pretty clear. Then it became a lot of options. And I think you see that now in e-commerce, where if you look on TikTok or Instagram or wherever, people are saying, hey, we're going to help you. We're going to help you with your e-commerce. What you should do is you should have this attractive marketing campaign, which is going to then bring them to this Instagram where you're going to nurture them, and then you're going to bring them to your special club where they're going to pay a small monthly fee, and then on top of that they're going to do this other thing. It's a lot more complicated. Sure, it is a cacophony of sound. Yep. It's like the symphony warming up. Yep. It's not yet clear. It's just everybody's playing their instruments, and that's what we've got right now. We've got a lot of noise. We've got a lot of people. The barriers to entry are very low. There's a lot of people who can look good and deliver poorly because it's easy to look good. And yet, over the long haul, there's a lot more substance that's maybe required to make a lasting organization. So I would just simply say it's the natural maturation of the market. It's a lot more noisy. It's a lot more complicated to do business. It's not a get rich quick scheme. If people are thinking you should start doing drop shipping, it's like, yeah, you and everybody else, and it's not that simple, but okay.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I mean, it's very interesting because it really stumped me yesterday, in terms of giving advice, because it's just like, oh my God, where do I even start, right? I mean, there's a million people selling baby products, right? So, if you're lucky enough to have, let's say, a TikTok video go viral and have 2 million views, well, great, you'll make some money because it's math. But, how do you now go from this noisy environment to, I suppose, a simplified environment? I think, simplicity is king, especially now with all this noise going on, right? So what do you think, and I'm thinking out loud, what do you think is a way to simplify e-commerce these days? Is it your brand and, going into brand integrity, or what would you say the simplifier would be? Because you have to, in my opinion, I think you have to simplify now. You can't make it more complicated. People are just going to lose interest, right?
And I guess my question is, what is there to simplify? So I had a conversation the other day with a guy who's he wants to scale out a business. Mm-hmm. And he has a pizza shop, successful pizza shop, but also works a full-time job in tech. And he's got an idea around pizza shops and customer service.
Okay.
He is not the first person to have that idea. I advised a company 3 or 4 years ago who had a very similar concept. And his question to me was, I would like to, should I go get money? Should I go get money to raise capital to scale out this business? I can do this in a manual fashion, or I could raise money and do it in an automated fashion. And I looked at his LinkedIn profile, and we talked for about an hour and a half. And I said, I noticed that you have a child on your shoulders, and you're like running through a park. That's your background on your LinkedIn profile. And I said, so I want to encourage you that if you would like to keep that child on your shoulders and keep your several other children and wife happy at home, you might want to consider what kind of life that you want to have. Because if you launch into this great world of venture capital, you now have other people that you are responsible for, and they want a return on their money.
Yep.
Your life's going to become more complicated. You might be able to grow that business wildly, but just know that your life will be more complicated. And you have to make sure that everybody else who you are currently responsible for and want to keep along the journey are willing to sign up for that complication as well. I think this idea of simplification is about principles. It is, how do we build the foundation for our work and our life, really? How does then that express itself in our work? Which then and then on top of that, it's how do we change with the times? So a principled business where we're always going to take care of the customer, it really doesn't matter whether the customer is online or offline or on TikTok or Facebook. We're just going to take care of the customer at the end of the day. That's maybe a principle, right?
Right.
If our principle is we're just going to grow madly and we're going to get a bunch of cash in, well, I don't know what to tell you. That doesn't really have any firm foundation on it long term. There's nothing throughout history that says that that's a goal to chase.
Right.
So I think simplification, life is complicated. Simplification comes from developing principles for life and then ensuring that everything else conforms to those principles, whether
Absolutely.
that's your business or your relationships.
I like that. That's very true. I mean, for me, the one word that sticks out and when you're talking is authenticity, and being authentic to yourself as a priority, and not jeopardizing your life for principles that are could be good for somebody else, but for yourself you may not jive with it. And sometimes that's money, sometimes that's image or whatever it is. So I think that at any time that I've advised companies or brands or even people, it's all about, well, would you do this job for free? And man, most people just have to think about it, right? And it's a good question. It doesn't mean that you have to do it for free, but it means, are you authentic in what you're doing right now, or are you lying to yourself? Are you lying to yourself because you have the family, And I think that long term it falls apart, right? So I think that even going back to the question about e-commerce or running a company is, I think that we have to be honest with ourselves and be authentic in whatever we do, even if it means we're going to make less money. But I think it'll last longer and you'll be far happier, right? So it's a very good point. I think, that's something to ponder, I suppose, right? Talking about happiness, segmenting over into, getting, you get into your, fifth exit or whatever. I had a few myself, and eventually you realize that, it's not all about the money, right? What kind of insights have you gotten after you achieved certain things and added zeros to your bank account and and kind of had that question of, now what?
Well, the now what is a dangerous place to be. I think my now what after my first exit, let's say, was short-lived because I got anxious about, like, I got to go create, I got to go do, I need more. Because I think the now what is for a person who's a natural creator, a person who's an entrepreneur, a person who wants to solve problems, when we are not solving a problem, when we're just sitting at home taking care of the house,
Yep.
playing video games,
We create
traveling
problems.
with the family, right? We tend to create problems because we are creating something that, and how many times have I done that? So many times I've created
Yep.
something that nobody wanted, because I just wanted to do it. And that it's led to a lot of experiences, but it's led to a lot of heartache as well, because man, I spent a ton of cash on that. I broke some relationships doing that because
Yep.
I was just like, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta create, I gotta do. And I think so. I think the now what really a lesson to learn is to simply pause for a bit and ask the question of other people, what do you think I should be doing now? Because everybody's talking about, you should find your own inner truth, and that's neat. I totally get it. I understand where that's coming from. However, when you sell a business for millions of dollars, do you go then talk? Like, who do you talk to? Do you talk to your friends and you're like, hey, let's go out for dinner? We're just sold a bunch.
Yeah.
We sold the business, right?
Yeah.
Or do you go talk to other people who've traveled the same path? And and sometimes it's hard to find those people and seek them out and ask for their advice.
Yep.
And so I think that I think one thing I've learned now is to just slow the train a bit. Slow down. Everything has a way of coming together. Pause.
Yep.
Because the cost of running out ahead of if some days it's a fight. It's a fight to fight for your business. It's a fight to fight for your relationships. If someday it's a fight, watch how far you're running out ahead of the people who are fighting with you. Because
Right.
if you're too far out, you're the one who's going to get killed. And that I think is a good principle for people in business or in life. They're like, I got to start a side hustle. Slow down for a moment. Why? Is it because you have cars you can't afford and a house you can't afford and a job you hate and you're starting to get frustrated with everybody around you and they're getting frustrated with you? Is that your issue? Well, I got news for you. Adding more
Yep.
isn't going to help you. What you should be doing is asking what you shouldn't be doing. What should I no longer do? And begin from a place of cutting out, which then leaves you open to go, okay, well, now what? And then we have to go outside of ourselves to invite new information in.
Mm-hmm.
Too often we're solving problems that maybe they're real problems, but we only see the problem that we can understand,
Right.
which means we come up with a resolution that we can understand.
Yep.
And yet, if we're in a place that we've never been before, there are inherently problems we don't know about with resolutions we have never experienced. And so we are not the right people to go about solving them. That I think is a good principle to build upon. I need to ask more questions. I need to pause a little longer. And I think it clears some things up.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big proponent of taking one step back, three forward. A lot of times, and I know in my younger years, it's like go 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 go. Let's just get and eventually you're gonna burn out. And not only will you burn out, but the people around you are gonna burn out, right? And that is probably worse than you burning out, right? Because, like you said, relationships will fail, friendships will fail, and so it is important to smell the flowers, once in a while, right? So really good advice. I like that a lot.
Well, to your point of the people around you burning out, that is a much bigger problem than you burning out. It's as if everybody is having a dinner party, right? And you're like, hold on a minute, I need to come back. I'm going to go out and I'll be right back. When you've burned everybody else around, you're the only one coming back to the table.
That's right.
That's not a dinner party.
That's right.
And it's harder to find those people to go around the table again. And if you're an entrepreneur going from business to business or thing to thing, creating, make sure that everybody's with you, because at the end of the day, you will set yourself much further back once you've burned everybody else around you.
That's true. So how did you solve the problem of, many times I was, traveling at 150 miles an hour and people around you, they only can go to 90. So how did you actually, get people to, or did you change people? Did you find new people? How do you get everybody on the same wavelength, speed, so to speak, right? Is there any kind of magic, solution to that?
Magic? Yes, probably. I don't know that I do it so well, but I think one of the things is recognizing what's most important. is it most important that everybody is on board with whatever that thing is that we're going to do as a company? Maybe that's not actually true. Maybe it's okay that there's somebody who's not on board. But one thing I've recognized about myself, and this sort of holds things back, and makes me sometimes go a little bit slower now. I look at it this way, and this is maybe the magic part. When I'm talking to somebody, communicating about my concepts, are they getting better? Are those concepts getting better? Are they challenging me? Or is my voice the one that's just coming through? And I'm feeling like I'm the guy, I'm the mule pulling the cart, right? If I ever feel that, I just immediately stop.
Okay.
I just stop. And that's just sort of like, you just got to seek that out in yourself. Because that's a leading indicator that the next month is not going to get any better.
Right.
It might get worse, in fact. And along with that person that I'm talking to, I like it this way. And I don't know how to explain it other than, when the train's leaving the station and there's always somebody who's not on it, either that's the wrong train or it's the wrong person.
Right.
So be okay with not everybody's going to be on board, and that's fine. Not everybody has to be on board. And if it's really important to you that you're on that train, then you just have to resign yourself to that person's not going to be on the train with you.
Absolutely. I think that also speaks to, the 5 people you hang out with type of deal, you turn, and it's almost become a cliche word, but it really, really, really resonates with reality, absolutely. You have to look at the people you hang out with, includes good friends and also family, and then look at, am I benefiting them? Are they benefiting me? And that whole arrangement, it's really amazing. You wrote a book called What Could Be, correct?
I did.
So tell us a little bit about that. Why did you write a book? And why did you write a book that has that title? What Could Be? I like it.
Yeah, What Could Be, Creating a Life of Meaning and Purpose. I wrote that book after a dark time where I had experienced a lot of success, and then I was the guy out in front, well in front of everybody else, and I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing, and lost a lot of stuff through that. Lost close friendships and lost businesses and lost all sorts of stuff. And I had to, all those things I talked about where how we express ourselves in our business are built on principles. I had to go back to what really is important here. And I think that we all are gifted a time in our life when we must ask the question, what's really important? And then rebuild all of the things on top. And so I wrote this book, and in some ways I feel like it wrote through me, which is a great experience.
Yep.
But I wrote the book because I thought if there was something I could tell myself, if there was something I needed that could encapsulate in 170 pages, what could get me through that time, and not only just get me through that time, but put me on the other side of that time with strength and authority in my life, those would be those 170 pages. And that's, I think, what that book does. In fact, I was talking to a lady out of Alaska just the other day. She's in a small community in Alaska, and she's a teacher, and she wants to get into business and relational issues and all sorts of stuff. And she just wanted to, quote, pick my brain for a little bit. And we got talking about all sorts of things. And she ordered my book, and she wrote me back a week later. She says, I'm 7 pages in, and I'm already thinking clearly.
Wow.
And to me, I'm like, wow. I mean, I look at, it was powerful for me. It was I was weeping through the pages sometimes, and then I was coming out, but here's where you're going. But to hear from somebody else, 7 pages and I'm already thinking more clearly, that's huge. And I think back to this idea that when we look at our lives and we find ourselves in a situation that we're unsure of, we only see problems that we can understand. We only see result or resolutions that we can understand. But when somebody comes in from the other side and says, hey, wait a second, the problem you see is not the problem that is. Therefore, the resolution that you're chasing not going to resolve the root issues.
Right.
It's really important, to your point, surround yourself with the right people as best as you can see. And that's a gut instinct, I think. And sometimes the universe has a way of directing them right across our paths at the exact time we need it. We just have to be humble enough to accept it. And then I think identify those principles and move on. And that's what could be creating a life of meaning and purpose is all about.
That's awesome. That sounds great. It's interesting how, probably when you started, you were like, well, I'm going to write a book for other people and tell them how not to do certain things or do certain things. And in actuality, it's almost like a catharsis where you basically are writing it for yourself in a way, right? And getting insight into everything that has happened and, throwing up all the stuff and, and putting it into words and into a bound cover. So that's really cool. So the one thing that stands out for me when you were speaking is the concept of loss, right? Most people want to avoid losses because who the heck wants to lose things, But then from losses comes wisdom, and from losses come new beginnings. So what would you say loss is all about? Is this something that is required in a way? And what are you losing? And what are you gaining? And, can you actually keep people from loss, so to speak?
Loss is required. No, you can't keep people from loss. And if you do, you will destroy them. And I think loss has a clarification quality to it. Loss clarifies for us. It really clarifies what's important.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's an interesting word. It's not a fun word, but it also resonates with me because obviously everybody has gone through loss, right? So that's really interesting. Cool. What is your eternal purpose? I know that you talk about eternal purpose, so I'm curious to hear what you, Jason Todd's eternal purpose is.
Oh boy.
Do we have enough time?
How deep do you want to go? Well, it depends. It depends on what you talk about. But I have one of my fundamental principles, my backdrop for how I choose to experience the world and live is that we are created on purpose for a purpose. And if we knew that the things we did mattered, and us finding like that inner heartbeat to seek out something that's, man, I think I'm meant for more than this. If we knew that it was really vitally important that we did that, we would get up with a spring in our steps. We would treat people around us differently. Sometimes we would slow down because we'd realize, wait a second, you know what? I'm not the linchpin holding this thing together. And if I don't get on to this thing today, you know what? That's fine. It will be okay. Or if I tried my best and everything crumbled around me, that's okay. It is what it is, and we'd accept it and we'd move through it or move on.
Right.
So I do believe we're created on purpose for a purpose, and that gives us certain responsibilities and authority to go about affecting our world in positive ways. And I think those were the responsibilities, authority are to name a future reality that we do not have, and then go about creating that reality, and then also destroying things that no longer serve us. Back to your idea of loss. Even taking away things that we don't like about ourselves involves loss. It involves mourning. That thing was there for a time, for a season, for a purpose, for us, and we're like, I don't need that anymore. We still got to get rid of it. It's the old trinkets in my house that my mom dropped off. She's like, here, these things were in a box for you. And I'm like, no, because now I got to look at this thing from 20 years ago. And I'm like, I don't want to get rid of that.
That's right.
I don't need it. It involves a little bit of loss. Is it a meaningful loss? No, not really. But it still involves loss. But it doesn't. It really does. That doesn't need to join me on the next journey, on the next part of the journey. So we need to name a future reality. We can go about creating it, and we can go about destroying things either out of maliciousness or stupidity, or because they no longer serve us. Right. Those are the responsibilities that we as humans have, And that might express itself through starting a business. It might express itself through just being a good person in our neighborhood. But I think it elevates us. And if you can't have joy knowing that you've got a great responsibility and the universe responds to your will, I don't know what you're doing. So go figure it out.
Absolutely. Well, I absolutely agree. That's awesome. I mean, lots to ponder. If you were in my shoes and you would have asked yourself a question that I didn't ask, what would that be?
Oh boy, that's a good question. If I was in your shoes and I would ask a question, you talked about loss, and you talked about it for 45 seconds, a minute. Loss is a big word. What's on your mind when you think about loss?
I'll answer that, but
Yeah.
the question is directed at you. Is there a question that I didn't ask you that you would have asked yourself?
Yeah, I would have delved into loss a little bit more and said,
Okay.
talk to me about loss."
Okay.
And then leave it wide open.
Okay. So again, I think, so what is law again? What is it that you lost? And I don't mean materially, but is it the ego? Is it what is the one thing that you feel that you lost that benefited you?
The one thing that I lost that benefited me was, I like what you talk about with ego, but I think ego is an important quality to have. Ego is not necessarily a bad thing. An ego out of control is, but isn't everything out of control a bad thing? So a unnecessary pride. I think it's important to take pride in oneself, but when it goes beyond, and then I guess think of it this way: I sold my first business, wildly successful, and then I thought I should start another business. So I started another business. At one point in time, I started a gym.
Okay.
And I co-founded it because I wanted to be a silent partner in this thing. I knew shit about running gyms. And I wasn't an avid guy. I didn't want to run a gym, but I wanted to help this guy who wanted to run a gym.
I had the exact same story, believe it or not.
And you know what? He wasn't good at running gyms either. And so then I ended up with a gym that I didn't want to run. Okay. So I was wildly successful in e-commerce. That doesn't make me wildly successful at running every other type of business.
That's right.
That was hubris, pride out of control. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do it maliciously. I did it for good meaning, good purposes, but I was not really taking the time to pause and go, wait a second, what do I want what is my life going to look like 5 years from now? What happens if this thing doesn't work? What happens? Just take a moment, ask another person who ran a damn gym and go, should I get into gyms? And they would have said, no, probably not.
Amazing. I have a parallel story. The same thing happened to me. Absolutely. Except I had no interest in it, and so it fell apart. But yeah, interesting that we have that parallel. Well, that's awesome. I think that was a really nice talk. I think that hopefully we'll get to have another chat in the future. I really appreciate you being on the podcast, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me.